The population of Ireland today is still only about half of what it was in 1840. The famine helped to stabilize Irish agriculture. The land was now more able to support the population. But the core of the problem still remained: land ownership. Much of the land was still owned by alien, sometimes absentee landlords. Rents were still high. The peasantry still lived in dreadful poverty. Those who could not afford the rent were evicted, like the family in this photograph. Those evicted faced total destitution and the prospects of starvation or emigration. A land league was established to mobilize the peasantry. Campaigns were mounted against rack-renting landlords. Rent strikes were organized. But still the evictions continued. These photographs record one such eviction in County Clare in the late 1880s. The tenants would barricade themselves into their homes. The landlord would come to oversee the proceedings, and the eviction was carried out by hired henchmen. A battering ram would be used to break into the cottages of the tenants. The police and the British Army were often on hand to defend the landlord's interests. After the tenants were evicted, their cottages were made uninhabitable to prevent reoccupation. The evicted families could only look to a bleak future. The president of the Land League was Charles Stuart Parnell, who also led the Irish Nationalist MPs at Westminster. As a counterpoint to the agitation on the land, Parnell pursued a strategy of delaying, obstructing, and hampering the business of Westminster. With Parliament almost paralyzed, British politicians were forced to look at Ireland. Gladstone had long tried to reform Ireland. He eventually decided that only Home Rule would suffice. But as an old man, Gladstone saw his Home Rule proposals defeated. But slowly the land question was tackled. Gladstone had begun the process of land reform in Ireland. A series of acts aided the transfer of the land from landlords to tenants. In the first 2 decades of the 20th century, 9 million of Ireland's 22 million acres were handed back to tenant farmers. It looked as though gradual reform by Parliament was pacifying Ireland where everything else had failed.
All of the grievances that really gave birth to Irish nationalism and nourished it through the 19th century had pretty much been rectified. Tenant farmers owned their farms. They were no longer tenant farmers, they were peasant proprietors. Catholic emancipation had been granted, and British government had spent money in public works, and they had given money to the congested districts, and they had financed the national school system in the country. And so that in economic and social terms, that Ireland had made great progress. But by 1900, nationalism had taken on a momentum of its own. It had become separate from the things that created it, from the grievances that created and nourished it. And that nationalism was a vital, living thing in itself. And it was too late to solve the national question by remedying social and economic grievances.
County Carlow, 1913. The Irish demonstrate support for another Home Rule proposal before Parliament. A minority was deeply opposed to this bill. The Ulster Protestants said they would fight to defend the union with Britain. Despite this offer of only limited devolution, most Irish nationalists cheered their parliamentary leaders. However, new forces were at work. In 1913, Dublin saw a series of bitter industrial disputes. With the docks idle, armed police distributed essential supplies in the city. The intellectual of the Irish labour movement was James Connolly, a revolutionary socialist born in Scotland. His was a socialist vision of a free Ireland.
The national and economic freedom of the Irish people must be sought in the establishment of an Irish Socialist Republic and the consequent conversion of the means of production, distribution and exchange into the common property of society.
Although he drew on new ideas which were fermenting in much of Europe at the time, Connolly also called on older traditions from the Irish past.
The social radicalism of the 1790s, translated into 20th century language and represented by James Connolly, was the workers' republic. The idea that political and social change were linked, and that a sovereign Irish state would be a fairer state, would in fact be socially a more just society than that which it would replace.
In the countryside, the Irish still harboured a lasting resentment of Britain. They looked back to the traditions of the old, free Gaelic Irish nation.
Ireland not free only, but Gaelic as well. Not Gaelic only, but free as well.
Irish cartoons of the time clearly express this spirit. Gaelic Ireland could rise, throw off British rule, and be free. This caught the imagination of the Irish poets and scholars. The interest in the legends and traditions of the past led to a revival of Gaelic language and literature, which gave Irish nationalism a new spirit of self-confidence and of cultural identity, a romantic vision of the past, and hope for the future.
And into that romantic nationalist, cultural nationalist stream, there also went the more enduring, physical force, separatist, single-minded pursuit of independence, which was the Fenian tradition, which was 1798.
This tradition was to be seen at the funeral of a famous Irish patriot, O'Donovan Rossa, in 1915. He'd been involved in one of the two armed uprisings against British rule in the 19th century. A poet and schoolmaster called Patrick Pearse spoke the funeral oration.
The defenders of the realm think they have pacified Ireland. But the fools, the fools, the fools, they have left us our Fenian dead. And while Ireland holds these graves, Ireland unfree shall never be at peace.